Welcome back to Patch Notice. I'm your host, Jackie, and today we're going to be covering the 17th of June update for Deadlock. This was a bit of a sleeper shadow drop, with Yoshi not even atting everyone in the official Discord, but the contents are gargantuan. We had a whole load of changes, gameplay, and visual across the board inside of this patch, with map additions, urn rebalancing, making it so you're more encouraged to run the urn rather than just sit and camp with it, rescue beam nerfs finally arriving, thank Yoshi for that one, as this item has been a pain in the backside in every game of Deadlock. Not only supports, everyone was buying it. And there's been some very interesting overhauls to the core mechanics of Deadlock as well, with some impactful soul changes. Heroes and objectives will no longer display real souls that can be denied or secured on death. Instead, the active participating players will instantly be rewarded with that soul bounty. Everything's changed in this patch. Even flex slots have once again been rebalanced, and I think in a better manner this time around, making it so you have to take all 3 of the Guardians for a flex and all 3 of the Walkers. So you're actually encouraged now to complete the objective gameplay. You can stall out teams. If you're snowballing, it's only going to get worse for your opponents, and if you're on the back foot, well, you better hope you can find your way into those Guardians. But let's get into it. So much to talk about in tonight's patch notice, so I'll be guiding you through everything that's changed and keeping you up to date with all the key beats. Of course, let's start off with what I teased in the beginning, the map changes. Now, I said this is gameplay and visual, as it really is. You've got a great mix of both, and Broadway and the mid-boss arena beneath it is the targeted area that Valve have looked at. It seems like they weren't really happy with the redesigned bridge that we've had since the addition of the 3-lane version of the Cursed Apple. It's always had kind of weird problems, really, with balancing around Lash or other characters. Took some time to smooth out the hitbox of the skybox clipping in and messing up all of your abilities. Following that, though, I think it was just the gameplay felt a bit odd, having this structure that blocked so much vision and made the lane quite claustrophobic at times. They've opted to go back for a more kind of standardized Deadlock idea of just using a normal full-length bridge. You can see on screen now the after footage of what they've done here. Mass changes to the locations of the veils, the way you're able to navigate these to get down towards the mid-boss and mid-breakables area of the map. Of course, some lovely visual additions as well. I think this is actually the first time we've seen water in Deadlock, as they've slipped a little bit of a texture inside of these grates. At the minute, it's lightly blue with a bit of a hint of reflection. Kinda cool. I guess we'll see if it's a finished texture or if it's going to change some more. On screen here as well was the before and after comparison of those veil reworks. Obviously, the veils on Broadway, in reality, you'd use them sometimes for a quick escape or if you were trying to be relatively annoying, but they had no great gameplay purpose in terms of where they led. It would just launch you round the back, kind of into the enemy territory. So now they've restructured it so that it connects underneath into these connected bridge stairways. This will give you a clear path to get down towards the mid-boss arena. I actually think from the games that I've played preceding the patch coming out about a day or two ago now, it's felt pretty good. It feels like it's far smoother and giving you quick movement options where you can slide in, but also far more cover to play around. Let's have a look at an aerial comparison though. If we pull the camera back a little bit, you can see what we're working with now in terms of the structure and layout of the lane. Of course, you've got far more open space when it comes to verticality on top of the bridge. So in that sense, Lash ults, Dynamo ults, if you're trying to grab mass characters groups up towards the bridge, it might actually be a bit better for you. But you're still going to run into issues as Lash when using that Death Slam if you want to grab targets due to how much space they now have to hide underneath. Although the map geometry hasn't changed too much with the rework into the new bridge, there is more areas that you can clip on now, with these little statues holding the grails full of water, kind of giving you a bit of leeway. Obviously, all you've really got to do is break that line of sight and duck under the bridge. This is how the bridge used to look, of course. There was no way through it. It was just the standard classic Deadlock bridge. This is what it now looks like. You can see it's been opened up and is far more expansive, connecting the whole area and making it feel far more synonymous so that you actually have different rotation paths that make sense. Ways to juke your opponent, but also you can get to where you want to be way quicker, which was always one of the key problematic kind of reasons why I think people were hesitant to enjoy Blue Lane following the changes from 4 lanes into 3 lanes. It felt like contesting towards that rejuve and getting a seamless pathway down there sometimes could be a bit unfavourable. With these changes though, I'd argue it actually could feel way better long term. There's been even a couple of spicy changes thrown in that we'll get into a little bit later that could exacerbate that and make it a bit more competitive when fighting over mid-boss. This is the breakable segment of the map as well. You can see the layout hasn't really changed too much in terms of the box placement, but what has changed is how you get there. On the pre-patch version of the map, you had these 2 towers, of course using that subway theming that we used to have with the 4-lane version of the map. Well, they're now gone. You can see in the comparison that's been completely gutted, as you don't need those ropes. Ropes, as much as they're useful for climbing verticality quickly and some interesting use of the knockdown stun mechanic when someone's climbing it towards bridge buff, they are a little bit annoying at times. And the far smoother movement in Deadlock comes from being able to slide and wall bounce, so more use of stairs, archways, and opening up what already existed, with a light art pass going in to add some new textures to bring it all together and add a bit of life to this area. Overall, I think it actually looks super pretty, and you can see the first steps of where Valve want to go with mid-boss now. If we take a top-down view and start to plunge through the ground and get our eyes on the actual mid-boss arena itself, you can see that things have certainly changed. Valve said in the patch notes that this was the first steps towards rebranding it as a sewer, and I'm quite excited about that. You know me, I've always been advocating for Rat Fella's debut in Deadlock, so maybe there's a chance we actually could get some sewer rats and some interesting changes around this idea of it being a sewer underneath New York. We've got the before and after comparisons as well that we'll go through to show off just how much they've done. New textures, new map geometry, and so many interesting bits that feel like they've got story behind them. Whereas before, of course, it was very generic, hadn't changed too much from that initial museum design that we had way back in May of last year. Obviously, it used to be above ground, now we're in the depths below, but maybe that was the right decision after all, with the theming all now starting to come together, and Valve adding all of these nicely coloured pipes that lead your eyes towards both of the lanes in Greenwich and York. A real nice texture as well of a kind of sickly looking water. You kind of feel like you don't want to step in it when you're fighting over rejuve, and even just smoothing out the gameplay loop in terms of the map design down here, brightening it up, adding more contrast, and a whole lot more options for smooth movement. They said they added some rubble towards the staircases, and you can see it in a few of these after shots as well, where they've basically given you a ramp on the left and right hand side of the staircases, so you don't necessarily need to always mantle or jump up or use the stairs if you're sliding in. You've got other options now for a quick attack on the rejuve, or to try and set you up to maybe defend from oncoming assailants. Overall though, I think this is a great first step. You can see the idea behind it with what Valve want to do with this portion of the map, and it feels so cool to finally get an update towards the mid-boss arena. It's been untouched for quite some time, and it's come to life very quickly. I love having a look at all the new textures have gone in as well. You can see these sort of browns, darker greys that are being used for the new wood textures on the side, with the stone facing, the new cobblestone underneath, and this is that murky water as well, directly beneath the mid-boss. You could imagine this place filling up with stagnant water, little rats scurrying around, kind of running all over the place, these little connecting areas as well that have some details behind them. If you no-clip through these, you can actually see there's a few little holdovers and weird elements of design, like this door on the left-hand side. What's in there? Is Ratfella locked away? Will he eventually break out? Who really knows? But I love what they've done with this, and I'm very curious to see how far they take it. But whilst we get a nice before and after pan here, let's actually follow this through and go over towards York Lane, as it's changed massively. For some reason, we've lost all of the grass. It's been killed off. This wasn't mentioned in the patch notes, but I spotted it when obviously getting the establishing shots, so I wanted to show this off, as they've replaced the texture with, again, that kind of murky, wet-looking cobblestone that I believe is new, and it's the first time we've really seen it utilized inside of Deadlock. So a new visual asset that they've decided to pop onto York Lane as well. Makes sense, maybe, that this side of the map will be a bit more industry focused with what we've got with some of the designs, especially towards the Amber Hand side, and then you've got Greenwich for the green, nice, luscious contrast on the other side of the map. So I don't hate this. As much as it's a different change and you are losing a bit of that greenery, I think it looks really cool. So that is the majority of the update, those big focuses on the map changes. But then we can get into the meta-defining changes. This really is the nitty-gritty. If you're more of a casual player, this is something you're going to want to be aware of, as the game has changed massively off the back of this one update. Now, we'll start off with card trick, because there's been multiple buffs towards this for Wraith, and this excites me a lot. As someone that's been playing so much Wraith all the way back since last year, Card Trick was one of the best additions to her kit. If you didn't know, back in the day, Card Trick used to work where effectively the game would just auto-target whatever was near you, with cards occasionally being thrown out. Card Trick was then changed to be the track and trace, really skillful ability that it now is. Unfortunately though, for quite some time it's felt like it's taken the backseat in Wraith's kit, with full auto being the far more lucrative piece of her utility. Well, I'm happy to say Card Trick probably is back, and so would be more hybrid focused spirit builds for Wraith as well. Gun's taken a bit of a hit. We'll get into that in a moment, but for now, let's focus on the highlights for Card Trick. At Tier 3, you're now going to be doing a 25% slow. It's only 1 second, but hell, 1 second of 25% slow just off a Tier 3 for those Card Trick cards. That's actually going to be really strong, especially if you're building this up with like a rapid recharge, increase into your spirit. There's so much potential to harass and spam cards to buy time for your teammates, or even just consistently get the extra burst damage out from your actual gun itself. Alongside that, spirit scaling has gone up as well, and we've seen them play around with the idea of trying to draw players back towards those hybrid builds, with Card Trick getting some love again. This is why I said you're probably going to want to start building hybrid. Bullet damage growth has been reduced by 18%. That's quite a significant margin. Obviously, Wraith really was carrying so many players into Eternus as of late, especially since the item rework. It felt like she came alive, synergizing so well with some of the newer gun items and the spirit items that fell in there that overlapped as well. But at least Valve have tackled this in quite an aggressive, but honestly fair kind of balance patch here. Having a look at it, you can see the changes that we're working with for the Rake, a classic weapon. Yes, it is going to be dealing less damage over the course of the game. It won't be scaling as quickly, but you do have that added benefit of the slow for your Card Trick and some other adjustments. We'll get into the more positive elements that they've thrown in a minute, but of course we've got to focus on what they've changed with Full Auto. Full Auto's Tier 2 has been reduced from giving you 4 spirit damage to only 3 spirit damage, so a bit of a nerf on that. Of course, with more players most likely now prioritizing hybrid spirit builds and wanting to go into that Card Trick investment, this is one way it fairly balances out. But if you factor Full Auto's power and how much usability it got in terms of melting your way through objectives, that's where the big kicker comes in. It's going to slow down the split pushing terror that is a Fed Wraith in a game of Deadlock. You won't be as effective as just running in and shredding through those objectives early game especially. They've even decided to lower her overall HP at base, knocking it off by 50, down from 700 to 650. So again, you start to compound all of these changes, right? We've got reduction to the gun growth, more focus on Card Trick, Full Auto starts to take a backseat, and then they whack a bit of a health nerf at you as well. So this really was a big targeted set of nerfs on what really felt like some core issues with Wraith being so incredibly powerful in the current meta of Deadlock. But there is one great benefit. If you're a Wraith player, you'll know how frustrating it can be when Project Mind will clip on something. It looks like Valve have gone in, slimmed down the hitbox, and made it far more accurate with how this actually works now. When running, throwing it out, it's going to have a way higher chance of actually taking you to where you want to go. It will happen on occasion, but you actually really have to try to get it caught on map geometry, which is vastly better. Props to that one. Almost felt like it might be something that's always in the game. So love to see that they've gone in and resolved that on an engine level for the character. Of course, she's not dead. She'll still be viable. We're still seeing her played in tournaments already following the first day of the patch. So it looks like Wraith's back on the menu, but in a slightly different flavor. Switching up the flavor of hero nerfs, let's have a look at Warden. Again, another hero that's been incredibly powerful when it comes to split pushing and controlling lanes. And this is one of the big reasons. Last Stand. It's always such a problematic ultimate with how powerful it can be. And for a while now, Last Stand would give you the half cooldown on an interrupt, only 30 seconds. Well, Valve have decided that enough is enough, and you need to be punished if you use a Last Stand without viability to actually get it off. If you do get stunned, it will now be a full cooldown. Meaning maybe again we're pushed back into the direction of less hybrid gun builds for Warden, more focus on maybe picking up Majestic Leap and increase range with spirit scaling so that you can stay further out of fights. It's cool to see them trying to shift the meta a little bit and refocus with these problematic characters. Again, Last Stand has also had quite a few changes when it comes to how it's outputting its damage and the way it's working. But it's still viable, feels like it can be strong, but like I'm saying, you run that risk versus reward now of cashing in his ultimate. You can't just willy-nilly throw out a Last Stand in the face of someone that's got a stun. If there's an IV around you, you gotta get the binding word off first, or have backup from a teammate, or hell, like I was saying, throw out a Majestic Leap so that you can launch yourself in when the ultimate is already channeling. That might be the better way to do things. Substantial changes here to Warden's focus on Last Stand and the way that it's operating in the current flow of the game. He's been a great hybrid character with his gun going off mid-game as of late, and there's another hero that's also been a bit of a pain in the backside no matter what he's up to in lane. Let's have a look at Viscous and see what Valve have changed here, as these are some interesting adjustments, and there's a few visuals that I think will surprise you with the nerfs and adjustments to Viscous. First and foremost, it's a big nerf to Splatter. This is in the manner of how it's dealing damage, with it being reduced off the back of the second splat. Obviously, if you've been in lane versus a Viscous, you felt the wrath of that ult fire. Splatter was so annoying where you could effectively fire the first shot directly at a hero's feet, so you'd always get the bounce off for the second damage burst, and it would ruin you, just shotgunning players to death in lane. So they've tweaked how its output is now done and reduced it overall so that it's a little bit more skillful and less of just a blunderbuss full of goo. But Goo Ball has had a hitbox size increase, not in the sense of it outputting damage, but obviously being able to hit him. I realised some interesting things about how Viscous Goo Ball works over the course of making this episode of Patch Notice, so I'll guide you through those discoveries. But on screen now you can see the before and after comparison. It was leaning slightly to the left and a little bit smaller than the actual model itself when it doesn't have any items that increase the size of Goo Ball. On the right, it's now larger than the ball itself, so consistently hitting shots on a rolling Viscous will be easier. You've got more space to work with, and it will feel more accurate, of course, with the blob rolling around and wobbling a little bit when he is sort of cratering all over New York. So hitting shots onto his hitbox should be easier, and it certainly looks like a positive change if you're up against the Viscous. But this is a surprise. Did you know that the hitbox for Viscous won't actually scale in size, even if you use ability scaling increase items to buff the size of the ball itself? You can see here with the items in the bottom left, we've made his ultimate far bigger, but his hitbox, well, now it's in the center with a lot of dead space that you cannot shoot at around the edges. It worked this way before the patch as well, after doing some testing, but it feels a bit odd that it doesn't increase to actually match his size. I suppose it doesn't feel that bad generally in gameplay, but it's a revelation, making me realize why sometimes when it feels like you're clipping the edge of him, it just doesn't go through and deal the damage that you expect. So that's one for you boffins out there. And I'm sure we've got some Viscous mains that probably abuse that, so get the use out of it whilst you can. But let's cube up and switch on over to the next hero that's been changed. That's right, it's Lady Geist. Now, for Geist, they're not the worst changes in the world. Again, similar to Wraith, they certainly are nerfs, but we're still seeing her be really up there in terms of her pick potential, and definitely one of the best heroes for professional teams to be drafting out in terms of her lane clear and damage output. The bombs haven't been changed, so that's still going to be working as it was. But base bullet damage has been reduced down from 26 to 23 on Johann's gift. Of course, the namesake of the revolver, the snub nose that she'll shoot you in the face with. So the base damage on that bad boy is going down by 3 points of damage. It might make it a little bit harder for some of those early kills, which inside of this patch are actually far more lucrative. We'll get to that later though. Let's have a look what else they've changed, as there was also some adjustments to her speed and range. This comes into the form of her abilities. So what they've done is switch up how it's going to be working when you're using life swap. Before, of course, this had a slow of 25%. That's a self slow, so it meant that Geist would go slower when using and channeling the ability. That's been buffed massively, up to 40%, so you are so slow when chasing people down. Now again, it's not a huge nerf, but it has kneecapped her and left her in a bit of a riskier position when it comes to chasing heroes if you're looking to life swap off the back of draining some of that HP away. And if you do want to soul exchange, well, her ultimate is going to be harder to hit in terms of your actual range that you've got on it. Going down again here as well. You can see obviously with the meters displayed on screen just how much headroom you have to play with. And with Rescue Beam being changed, dragging Geists in to get the soul exchange off might be far harder. We'll see if this one gets switched up as the meta develops with a new patch, but it's interesting. Anyway, let's check out Kelvin and see what they've done to him. Feels like he's always showing up with random nerfs inside of these patches. This time around, it's heavily focused around his Arctic Beam. Cooldown's gone up by 1 second, alongside some further changes to, of course, the cooldown reduction that he gets with his tier 1. That used to be a 7.5 second cooldown reduction, now it's only 7 seconds, so again, compounding with the increase of the previous second at base, it's going to start to make a difference of spamming Arctic Beam as much, which it can be quite annoying, so they've even reduced the range down by 3 meters, so that you can't just ricochet Arctic Beam through everyone's faces and really freeze the entire server in an uncomfortable spot. But it's time to throw up our frozen shelter and move on to Calico, as Calico again had some gargantuan nerfs inside of this patch. Weirdly, it hasn't hit her as much as I'd expect in professional play, but in pubs it is going to be a bit harder to wrap your head around a few of these changes. Mechanical adjustments and overall slight nerfs. Up first though, let's have a look at what they've done to her HP, as of course she's been given the Wraith treatment when it comes to her base health, down by 50. Losing out there from 700 to 650, obviously HP on Calico felt like it was always there in droves, where she had so much self-sustain, especially with the items you tend to build into as well to get HP back from damage output. She was always living on a prayer and you just could not stop her. Well, maybe Bon Jovi not as much now. Obviously, you're going to want to focus on getting those golden boons in to be able to build up that base HP and make sure you're maximizing your farming on the character to offset that. Damage amp has also been changed, not only on her ultimate, but the way that it's scaling with her melee multiplier with Leaping Slash, as that's gone down by 0.3. And although that doesn't sound as bad when looking at the numbers, the values will be compounding when you think about the fact the damage amp on her tier 3 of Return to Shadows has been nerfed as well. So food for thought there if you're wondering about your burst damage potential. But when it comes to bursting open boxes as Ava, Valve have finally decided to bite the bullet and stop that Peterbald cat from breaking everyone's property. She'll no longer be able to automatically break boxes just by running through them. She'll bounce into them and kind of just turn a little bit. But they haven't really fixed this. With a little bit of digging, I realised that of course you can just jump on top of the boxes, and this will still shatter them relatively faster than using the new mechanic. Valve have added a pounce for Ava. The idea intention here is that you're supposed to be using this pounce that's bound to your melee key to break boxes as Calico, so that you can't just steamroll through and box max with very quick pathing, just building speed items and kind of torment pulse, to just be annoying, the mosquito gameplay that is Calico. However, I don't know if they intended to do this. I've realised that for some reason when using the new pounce, it's almost like the game thinks there is floor beneath you. It uses no stamina, only has a very short cooldown, and you can just hold the melee button, consistently leaping in a forward direction. This isn't the hugest buff, but it is an indirect buff and allows those of you that enjoy movement on the character already to get extra stock and versatility out from her, as you can just hold your pounce down and throw it in to break up your movement sequences to give you a little bit more airtime, or even break some of the flow of the game in terms of using reposition mechanics like the bounce pads. Those air vents, if you pounce whilst on top of it, you can instantly cut all of your momentum, so you could juke someone out into thinking you're going to use the air vents to reposition up towards, say, bridge buff, and then cancel all momentum and just sprint back towards the roof. It's interesting how this works, and I don't imagine it will stay like this for very long, but it is the way it works in the game at the moment. You can see here just how much distance you can get just out of channeling the pounces together. And of course, it won't affect your stamina, you still have your 2 jumps to play with as well, so breaking up your movement and using the new pounce as a bit of a sleeper movement tech might actually be a cool way to elevate your Calico gameplay. But that's what they've done to Ava. Slight nerfs overall for the character, definitely trying to scale back her initial burst damage output and make her slightly easier to kill, and they're trending towards fixing Ava being a box max machine. Item changes were also here in droves. Obviously, I mentioned the key one for me that really stands out, that is the fact you've solved Rescue Beam being the one trick item that everyone in the world wanted to buy. But this is the more interesting side that I like looking at, the visual changes that have gone in, as there's been some massive updates to the item portraits. I mentioned it before with, of course, the Arctic adjustment where we got the border around the tier 3. I like the fact they're doing more of this now. They're incorporating these borders to show off priority item picks, where when you're getting towards the big boy items, they're displayed that way, having a bit more of a grandiose nature. The rework on some of the art here as well is substantially different. We've had minor tweaks, and I'm always tweeting about it and showing off the before and after comparisons, but here you can see the entire visual styles for some of the item portraits has changed. It's really cool to see what Valve are cooking up with this, and I love some of the new designs that I showed off to you there. There's even more outside of this as well, so definitely dig through and have a look in game next time you're at the Curiosity Shop. Now then, let's move on to the gameplay changes themselves, as there's quite a few. Trooper base bounty has been reduced from 132 to 120. Effectively, just for what they've done here to dumb it down a little bit, Valve have made it so early on Trooper souls when killing Candle Troopers isn't as lucrative or worth as much as it used to be. But they've countered that by, after about the 24-minute mark, making them worth more souls, so you will get more late game but less early. That's because they want you to focus on kills. Finally, kill bounties have been increased. They're up by 50 souls at base and even cap out with an additional 200 souls towards the late game on a shorter scale. 40 minutes now, rather than 45 minutes being the bracket in which it would slowly tick up. And already I've seen using split pushes, ganking, playing off one another in lane and fighting to actually get kills feels rewarding for the first time in so long. So I love that change, and it's a great addition for the health of the game. Get out there and make sure you're getting those ganks off in lane. They've also fixed a potential bug where they say there was an issue with prediction on guns, causing some inaccurate spread to start to decay faster than it should. So that sounds like a nice change. Always good to see some gameplay first engine fixes that are thrown in. Rejuve's drop though. This is a big one. It might only be a second that's shaved off, but going down from 9 seconds to 8, you know that you could catch players off guard whilst they're getting used to this addition to the game, and it does feel a lot snappier. And like I mentioned in the intro, destroying objectives will no longer give you deniable or confirmable soul orbs, so you'll get what you get. If you confirm kills with that increased bounty, you're going to be claiming all the souls. If you take guardians and walkers, you're going to be taking that bounty home too. And they've tried to prioritize the idea of grouping up a lot more and actually really playing for control of the objectives on the map, with that bounty being split by the nearby players. You got a 20-second window to be classed as a nearby player as well, so it's a good change, and Valve seem to have sped up games in the right way. Rather than just increasing base resistance for troopers, they've made it so that walkers feel like they've got a bit more health to them, with an actual buff for walkers finally, giving them 10% more health in their total pool, but balancing it out by reducing the spirit resist they previously had down from 40% to 30%. It's nice. I think overall this is a really positive patch with some big influential gameplay changes that might look a bit sleeper if you overlook them in the notes, but adding all of them up together, there's so much change to the flow of the game, the way you're going to be rewarded, and the soul economy itself, with even the soul orb claim radius going down by 5 meters, so Valve want you to be proactive. They don't want you off to the side, sat in the lane, constantly farming each trooper wave. You're able to push out, go for the side objectives, and make sure that you're having your mark on the cursed apple. If you want to hear more about mine and Blank's thoughts on this update though, which there will be many, tune into the Dead Air podcast. We'll get a new episode out soon. We're both a bit busy at the minute commentating a Deadlock event that's running through to the 22nd, but that's it for your patch notice. I've been your host Jackie, thanks for tuning in and enjoy what is an amazing patch for Deadlock. It's a good time to be a deadhead. We'll see you in lane. Get back out there.